So let me ask you something. What if an entire city could just vanish? Not slowly crumble into myth, but just disappear from the face of the earth overnight. Well, today we're digging into the incredible true story of cities that did exactly that. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a legend, right? Like an echo of Atlantis. But here's the thing, this isn't fiction. It's a real and frankly terrifying phenomenon that's happened more than once. So the big question is, how does solid ground just swallow a city whole? And maybe even more important, what secrets do these lost cities leave behind for us to find? Let's dive in. All right, here's the plan. We're going to look at two incredible lost cities, relive the very moments they vanished, get into the scary science of how they were swallowed up, and then see what finding them again actually teaches us. Okay, so our story kicks off with two cities that couldn't be more different. We're talking about places from totally different worlds separated by more than 2,000 years. First, the ancient Greek metropolis of Helike, and second, the infamous pirate paradise of Port Royal, Jamaica. And I mean, you really couldn't dream up two more different places. On one hand, you've got Helike, a prestigious, super religious capital in classical Greece. And on the other, Port Royal, a city so jam-packed with pirates and taverns, it was literally nicknamed the wickedest city on earth. Complete polar opposites, right? But they were both united by one single, absolutely catastrophic fate. And let's be clear, Helike was a huge deal. This was no sleepy little town. We're talking about the leader of a whole confederation of 12 cities. Its temple to Poseidon, the god of the sea and earthquakes, which is kind of ironic, was famous all across the ancient world. So when Helike disappeared, it wasn't just a city that was lost. It was like a major cultural capital just got erased. And then you have Port Royal. Oh man, by the late 1600s, this place was an absolute boomtown, a hub of commerce, both legal and not so legal. It was the go-to port for guys like Captain Morgan and even Blackbeard. The wealth there flowed like rum, and get this, some people said a pirate could blow more money in one wild night than a plantation worker made an entire year. Just wild. So how on earth did it all come crashing down so fast? Let's really zoom in on those final fateful moments for both cities. We're looking at two completely different moments in time, more than 2,000 years apart. For Helike, the end came on a dark winter night when everyone was asleep. For Port Royal, disaster struck on a bright, sunny morning. In Helike, there were actually warnings, but nobody understood what they meant. The Roman writer Aelian wrote that for 5 days straight before the disaster, all the city's animals, we're talking mice, snakes, weasels, everything, just up and left. A total mass evacuation, heading for higher ground. And the people, they just stood there and watched them go, totally confused. And then it happened. A massive earthquake hit in the middle of the night. But it wasn't just the shaking that was the problem. The ground itself just gave way. An enormous wave rushed inland, and just like that, the city was gone. Wiped clean off the map. A rescue party of 2,000 men showed up later and they found absolutely nothing. Not one survivor. They couldn't even find a single body. For Port Royal, we know the exact moment it all went down. And that's thanks to one single incredible artifact. A pocket watch, pulled from the mud on the harbor floor. Its hands are frozen forever at 11:43 a.m., June 7th, 1692. That was it. The moment time literally stopped for the entire city. And the accounts from people who were there, they are absolutely chilling. A local minister wrote about seeing the ground just open up and swallow people whole. Imagine that. Buildings, roads, people's lives just sucked into the earth, right as a massive wave crashed over the city's fortifications. The human cost was just staggering. In Helike, it's pretty much believed that everyone died. Everyone. In Port Royal, the earthquake and the wave killed about 2,000 people right away. But then, in the horrible aftermath with disease spreading everywhere, another 3,000 lost their lives. Just like that, two bustling cities were silenced forever. Okay, so you have to be wondering, how does this even happen? How does solid ground literally turn into a liquid that can swallow buildings? Well, the answer is a geological process that is frankly the stuff of nightmares. It's called soil liquefaction. And here's an easy way to think about it. Picture a bucket full of wet sand. If you start shaking that bucket really hard, the water pressure between all those little sand grains builds up and up until they just stop touching.
The sand loses all its strength and basically becomes a thick, heavy liquid. Now just scale that up and imagine an entire city built on top of that stuff.
And that right there, that was the one fatal flaw that connected these two cities. Even though they were worlds apart, they were both built on the absolute worst kind of ground for an earthquake. Heerlijk was sitting on soft, waterlogged river sediment. Port Royal was built on a long, thin sand spit where the ground was soaked through. It's like they were these amazing cities built on top of geological quicksand. So let's just break it down step by step. 1. You start with that unstable, sandy, water-soaked ground. 2. An earthquake hits and provides intense shaking. 3. The water pressure inside the ground just skyrockets, pushing all the soil grains apart. And 4. Boom. The solid ground is now a liquid sludge. Everything on top either sinks straight down or just slides away.
Now for Heerlijk, what happened was something called a translational landslide. This is super interesting. The city didn't just sink into the Gulf of Corinth like everyone thought. Nope, the whole chunk of land it was on slid downhill, which created a big dip. Then the sea rushed in to fill that dip, basically creating a brand new lagoon, with the city of Heerlijk sitting right at the bottom.
And for Port Royal, it was even more direct and brutal. About 2/3 of the city. We're talking 33 acres of prime real estate, packed with taverns and warehouses. The ground just turned to liquid and the whole thing slid right under the waves into Kingston Harbor in minutes.
So for hundreds of years, these cities were basically just legends, scary stories from the past. But then, in the 20th century, the hunt to find the real thing finally began.
The search for Heerlijk was like a giant archaeological detective story that went on for decades. I mean, for years, everybody was convinced it was lost somewhere at the bottom of the Gulf of Corinth. Teams spent a fortune with sonar, searching the seabed, and came up with nothing. The big break didn't come from new tech, but from going back and taking another look at the ancient texts.
And this was the aha moment. A researcher and her team realized that this one key Greek word, poros, had been translated wrong for centuries. Everyone thought it meant sea, but it could also mean an inland lagoon. And just like that, they realized they'd all been looking in the completely wrong place. So they shifted their search from the sea to the land nearby, and in 2001, they found it, buried deep under all the dried-up mud of that ancient lagoon. Finding Port Royal was a little more straightforward, but what they uncovered was just as mind-blowing. Because the whole disaster happened so fast, it perfectly preserved the city, just as it was. It's no wonder it got the nickname the Pompeii of the New World.
I mean, what the archaeologists found is it's an unbelievable snapshot of everyday life. There's that famous pocket watch, of course, but they also found kitchens with pots still sitting in the fireplace, stacks of plates that just toppled over when the earthquake hit. They even found barrels of regular old trash with things like beard trimmings in them. These aren't just objects, they are literal moments frozen in time.
But back at Heerlijk, the discovery was maybe even deeper. See, as the team dug down, they realized that the big disaster in 373 BC, well, it wasn't the first one. Underneath the ruins of the classical city, they found an even older city from the Bronze Age, also destroyed by an earthquake. And on top of it, they found later Roman and Byzantine ruins. This wasn't just one lost city, it was a whole stack of them, a cycle of destruction and rebuilding that happened over and over for thousands of years.
So when you step back and look at it all, what do these resurrected cities really teach us? What's the point of finding these buried worlds? Well, it turns out each city tells its own really powerful story. Port Royal, it gives us this perfectly preserved snapshot of one single moment in 17th century life. It's incredible. But Heerlijk, with all its different layers, tells a much bigger story, one about incredible human resilience, about people rebuilding again and again after disaster.
And that's really the unique power of what archaeologists call catastrophic sites. Think about it. Most of the time when we dig things up, we find the stuff people threw away over hundreds of years. But at sites like these, we find life exactly as it was being lived. The plate's still on the table, the food's still in the pot. It gives us this crystal clear window into the past that we just can't get any other way.
Decades ago, that pioneering archaeologist Spiridion Marinatos, he predicted that finding Heerlijk would shed a great new light on the past. And man, was he right. Because of these disasters, we are learning more about life in classical Greece and 17th century Jamaica than anyone ever thought was possible.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? For centuries, Helika and Port Royal were just stories, dismissed by most people as impossible myths. But finding them proves that so much of our own history is still just buried, waiting for us. So the final question isn't just what other forgotten worlds are still out there, it's which of the myths we tell today will become the archaeology of tomorrow.